Thank you, everybody. Thanks to Indivisible. Thanks to Yolo People Power for bringing this group together. And looking around at the Hollywood squares, I see so many friends and folks who I know have been committed to the life of the Yolo County community for decades. It's a pleasure to be with you. This is a very, very important election because the office itself is critically important. The district attorney in any county in California has awesome responsibility and awesome authority and power to affect the lives, not just of the people who come to the courts, but the entire community that we live in. It's a very important job, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge and recognize that April is recognized across the country as Crime Victim Rights Month, and that there's no criminal activity, no matter how lightweight in quotes it is, that doesn't have an impact on the individual who is the subject of it, and then the community around us. Any crime hurts us in some way. So the question is not, though, how can we be as hard as possible on criminals, and how can we establish sanctions and controls that prevent any possible criminal activity, because it can't be done. And really, even when we send people to incarceration facilities at the local, state, and federal levels, 98% of them return to the communities from which they came. And so really the question for us is, how can we be smart on dealing with injuries against our community, injuries against persons and property? How do we prevent those activities from happening at all? And what's the role of the district attorney in making sure that we're actually being smart on crime and really focused on the restorative justice triangle of the offender or perpetrator, or the alleged perpetrator, the crime victim, and the community as a whole, and make sure that anything we do supports an overall restoration and a prevention of those activities. I think the district attorney has to be in touch with the community that they serve. The district attorney's role has a lot of legal responsibilities, but it also has some moral and ethical and connection responsibilities in a community. I'm so pleased that Cynthia Rodriguez has come forward to seek the office of the Yolo County District Attorney. Cynthia is so in touch with the lives of people in Yolo County. She grew up in Winters and Vacaville area. Her father was a farm worker. Her mother spent part of her childhood living homeless on the Sacramento River. Cynthia's parents both became educators, and in fact, her father has a high school in Vacaville named for him. Coming from those roots to give back to their communities has been a tradition and a family tradition for Cynthia. She has 4 children, lives outside of Winters. Cynthia has a stellar career. Her career includes being the Chief General Counsel for the State Department of Mental Health and a Deputy Director for Forensic Service in that department, a responsible leadership role that required her to provide advice to the governor and to other policymakers on mental health services. Of course, one of Cynthia's own children is a child with special needs, Down syndrome. Cynthia is very aware of the circumstances that run-of-the-mill, all of us people live in Yolo County. She's been very active in the Democratic Party politics. She's the leader of a West Yolo Democratic Club. I think that's where I first met her, was in the Winters community settings. In short, Cynthia is in touch with our community, but it's more than that. Her life experience and her career include being a deputy public defender, someone who protects the constitutional rights of even those who are accused of crime. And she worked in making sure that peace officers who had violated their trust were held accountable when she worked with prison guards who had misbehaved. So she understands the importance of fairness and ethical treatment of all people. But by herself, Cynthia would be a fantastic candidate for the district attorney role. But there's a case to be made that it's time for a change in Yolo County. And that's, I think, what some of you are interested in. Our district attorney, I think, I meant to look this up, but I think he's in his 4th term as district attorney in Yolo County. And he started out as a Republican and changed that over time as it became less popular, I suppose, in Yolo County. Jeff has a mantle of progressive reform philosophy. Unfortunately, that doesn't stack up with where he's actually been. Yolo voters and California voters voted overwhelmingly in support of Propositions 36 on decriminalizing, or actually making less stringent the criminal penalties for drug offenses. Voters in Yolo County and California voted heavily in favor of Propositions 47 and 57. We have a strong interest in Yolo County in revising, reforming bail practices. Mr. Reisig has been in opposition to all those measures. Right now, in fact, one of the district attorneys in California who's really been a leader, the LA County District Attorney, this DA Gascon, had a lawsuit brought against him for his actions, that he was trying to have to say that his prosecuting attorneys in his office would not require cash bail unless it was necessary for public safety. And he had a couple of other pieces that the assistant district attorneys in his office sued him. Well, Jeff, as the leader of the California District Attorneys Association, filed an amicus brief in favor of the suit against DA Gascon, a true reformer. That is quite something. The California District Attorneys Association also opposed Proposition 47 and supports a piece of legislation that was brought by Kevin Kiley, running for a Republican Assembly member, running for initially for governor and now for Congress, that would undo Proposition 47. Proposition 47 is a measure that lessened the offenses for some, and actually one of the ways that it did that was to increase the threshold for a property crime being charged as a felony to $900. And the idea that we've got as well, that the CDAA is coming forward with, and that Mr. Kiley presented in his legislation, is to reduce that threshold for charging a felony down to $300. And this, of course, would result in more and more people finding themselves caught up in the web of the court system. The web of the court system, by the way, in Yolo County, you'll hear from any of you who have served on juries in Yolo County, or who have been in contact with people who have served on juries. You might just ask how that went. And what I hear over and over and over, and I know Dean Johansson heard this over and over when he was seeking election to the DA role, that offenses that were coming before juries, jurists were just shaking their head saying, well, why is this act leading to that charge that leads to this expenditure of the public's resources and the court's resources to have jury trials over and over. There are people who we know, who you know, who have themselves or have had family members charged with offenses that are just outlandish. In fact, the DA in Yolo County has pursued things as simple as a minor campaign infraction, even if it was a proven allegation in a West Sacramento case, by filing charges against a candidate. And it was something very minor campaign action that even the FPPC wouldn't have carried forward as an investigation. Filed it as a charge. And when the day of the court trial took place, the person that the charge was brought against showed up for trial, and the press releases had already been issued. The public had already heard that the terrible and criminal activity in this campaign had taken place. The day that the candidate showed up at the court, the charges were dropped, proving that what was happening was a misuse of the charging authority of the district attorney. Another candidate, that frankly, this one is Cynthia herself. A volunteer had placed campaign signs prior to the allowable date for placing campaign signs. And two deputies from the sheriff's department showed up at her home, at Cynthia's home, telling her that she had better obey the law on campaign sign placement. Well, any of you who've been around any campaigns understand that such matters are pretty trivial, and usually they involve a call or simply a removal of the sign, not the direct intervention of law enforcement in rural community. These acts are intimidating. Their use of the district attorney's office to intimidate members of our community. I don't know how many of you have read the numerous press releases that come out of our district attorney's office. Seems like whenever somebody jaywalks or a spray can is found behind a Costco, there's a district attorney press release on the importance of that measure. This use of the DA's office as a public information machine, I take great issue with, because it's public dollars that are being spent to continue this drumbeat of criminal activity. For many years, Yolo County was sending more people per capita to state prison than all but 4 other counties in California. That was not because Yolo County had a higher crime rate or our citizens, our residents were living in fear of crime. It was simply the charging practices and the DA's approach to things. A couple of years ago, I became very concerned about the disproportionate effect of all of these activities on people of color in Yolo County. And the data is incredibly challenging to find, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. But one way to look at it is, what's the percentage of the people who are incarcerated in our county jail who are people of color? About less than 3% of Yolo County's population is African American. Almost 25% of the people in our county jail were African American at the time I looked at that. When I brought this issue up, the initial response from the district attorney's office in public and frankly, in writing and in letters to the editor and in a serious direct attack against our public defender, who also was concerned about this, was that, well, you have to understand that many of these people who are in our jail are not Yolo County residents. These African American inmates in the Yolo County jail are not Yolo County residents. They come from other counties and they commit crimes here, and we put them in jail. I was so troubled, and I continue to be confused about why that would be a relevant argument, that we have that kind of that's the argument. And so the idea was very much dismissed. The idea that it was a problem that we have disproportionate numbers of people of color in our jail and criminal justice system, because more African Americans have law enforcement encounters than any other population by proportion in the county as well. And it was completely dismissed by the DA's office until about 6 months ago or so. The DA started touting this portal, this data portal, and it became sort of a new born again crusader for equal treatment in the court system. Started issuing press releases about the human relations advisory group that he had formed, started issuing press releases about anti-bias training that had been provided to the people in the office. Now, on a charitable note, I'm glad that they're now paying attention to this issue. But I've got to say, part of this is you were against it before you were for it. And what is it that you didn't see for the first 16 years of your service that you're now suddenly paying attention to as we prepare for the second challenged election that's coming your way? I mentioned that the California District Attorneys Association it's an interesting group. You can look on their websites, very very generic. You don't see a lot of information about what issues they are interested in, what they care about. I'm sure they've got secret back channel places that their members can look and see what the party line is or can contribute to the ideas that they're actually working on. When you go to legislative hearings, almost always what you'll find is that there's rarely a letter from CDAA. On many press conferences, you'll see them standing behind the right-wing proposals. They're very adept at investing their campaign contributions in legislative campaigns for sympathetic candidates. And they're very good at raising issues in the same ways that Mr. Reisig does here locally. Opposition to bail reform, opposition to decriminalizing some drug offenses that were clearly attacking people of color in their early days. These California District Attorneys Association about a year ago became quite famous in California because they have this thing they call it's a Consumer Fraud Environmental Protection Fund. And while CDAA is not a public agency, it's a nonprofit member association, they do have a contribution from the state level for supporting small DA offices in small counties to pursue workplace safety and environmental damage lawsuits, litigation. So they get money from the state to do this. And about a year ago, it became clear that for a year or so before that, there had been audits released that about $3 million of these funds had been repurposed within CDAA for their administrative overhead to fund their, guess what? To fund their lobbying activities, their political campaign contributions, their media activities. So instead of having these funds available for small counties like Mariposa or Lassen to do this work, they had redirected those funds. That's not inconsistent with the practice we see here in Yolo County. A year ago, I issued an op-ed myself on the district attorney's budget. And one of the key findings that I was concerned about is that the DA was sitting on a $12 million fund balance and was still asking for $2 million in county general fund to support their ongoing operations and their proposed new operations. I took great issue with that and asked a number of questions. One of them was that why do you have $9 million in this fund called Environmental Protection and Consumer Fraud Fund? I think the DA is squirreling away funds, using his office for telling a story that he wants to be told, shining a veneer of reform across the whole operation, meanwhile continuing to charge the residents of Yolo County for criminal activities that are trumped up in excess of what a reasonable person would find. I call your attention to a letter to the editor this morning, actually, in the Davis Enterprise from a Dr. Libet that talks about a charge that Mr. Reisig's campaign team has made against Cynthia Rodriguez campaign. The charge has to do with where Cynthia received some campaign contributions. And Dr. Libet, I think it's really worth a read because he draws a lot of connections. When you look at it's a Facebook campaign ad. When you look at it, it's really puzzling. Well, the allegation is about accepting money from individuals, in quotes, connected to known child abusers. But the image is a bunch of dollars, money on a wall, like wallpaper on a wall. And then there are these beakers, these glass beakers. And it's just completely confusing and puzzling. What are these images and why are they in this? What connects these images to this particular message? Well, Dr. Libet, I think, did a really interesting deep dive on the connections of those images to right-wing conspiracy theories that go back to the child abuse scandals or conspiracy allegations that resulted in the pizza place being attacked during the Clinton campaign, And he talked about the anti-Semitic themes that were drawn by those images. I was just stunned to see that. But if we're talking about the role of campaign contributions in elections, then I think it's kind of interesting to know that many of the campaign contributions that went to Mr. Reisig in this last year were from people who work in his own office. Others are from the Sacramento Police Officers Association. Now, what in the world are they interested in Yolo County's district attorney race? $36,000, I'm told, of Mr. Reisig's campaign contributions come from outside Yolo County. Why are these folks interested in the DA race in Yolo County for the president of the California District Attorneys Association? And there's a gentleman named Gregory Padilla, and Gregory Padilla has a bail bonds company. So bail bonds folks have a strong interest in DAs who are not interested in reforming bail. What is bail? It's extortion money from those who are least able to pay. Bail is not an issue if you're a white collar criminal. It's only an issue if you're a low income person who, when you're kept in jail, you lose your job, you lose your car, you lose your family. And the only way you can get out is if somebody puts money up for you. It's not related to anything about the nature of your offense or the possibility that you're going to reoffend or harm someone else or hurt some property damage. This, if we're going to talk about campaign contributions, then how about former Republican Congressman Doug Osee? If Mr. Reisig is a reformer, what would Doug Osee have? Why would he think that it would be an appropriate way for him to invest his campaign funds? So I think that sword cuts both ways, and it's worth understanding who the affiliations are there. So for many reasons, I think it's time for a change. I think it's time for someone who's really in touch with our Yolo County values, someone who really believes in the heart and soul of our communities. In no way does this mean that we should turn a blind eye toward criminal activity, because every criminal activity has an impact on somebody. If your favorite lawn decoration is stolen, that might be something to you that's pretty important. It might have been your grandfather's. There is no small crime if you're the victim of it. But I think in proportion, we need to find ways to really understand what we're doing in crime and punishment in Yolo County and what the significant role of the person who sits in the district attorney's office is. I want the DA to be fair. I want them to to hold people accountable. I also want them to be in touch with the lives of the real residents of Yolo County. That's why I support Cynthia Rodriguez and why I'm so happy to see you all here doing the same. This is a winnable race. Dean Johansson almost did it last time. Dean was not known to anybody other than the folks who knew his kids, and yet he nearly did it. Cynthia has a much better chance, and she needs every bit of help we can give her, because it's a winnable race, but only if we work it for her. Thanks. Important.